You're listening to Trek FM.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of From There to Here, Trek FM's golden anniversary rewatch of all 729 episodes, starting with Enterprise and going through Voyager and even beyond. My name is Caitlin Walsh, and today I have Lee joining me. Lee, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. This is my last episode on From There to Here, so yeah, it's mixed emotions and all that sort of stuff. I'm looking forward to going back to a world where I'm not watching 8 episodes of Star Trek a week, and yeah, part of it's going to miss revisiting some kind of old episodes, so yeah, mixed bags.
Well, the beauty of podcasts is if ever you're feeling nostalgic, I'm sure you can start listening to From There to Here all over again, but this is my last episode as well, so I'm with you there on the feeling nostalgic and mixed emotions already. But without further ado, we have 2 episodes from Voyager's last season. The first up is Imperfection, the second episode of season 7. And this episode is it features the departure of the Borg children. And then 7 of 9 realizes that she is malfunctioning because she's getting a little too emotional. And that is antithesis to what it means to be Borg. So the doctor diagnoses one of her critical nodes is malfunctioning, a node that she needs for survival. And the Voyager crew unite and try to figure out how to fix this problem. Meanwhile, Icheb, who has remained on board because his family would want to turn him into a weapon again, decides to take matters into his own hands and puts his own life on the line to save 7 of 9. 7 was stubborn and refused initially to have him risk his life, but afterwards is grateful that Icheb cared enough to risk his life to save hers, and in the end Icheb is able to survive without his critical node. Lee, what did you think about this episode?
I think it's an okay episode. I'm a bit kind of fatigued of the Borg, like the 3rd episode in a row where they're played upon with. It's like some of the aspects I find kind of interesting about this episode is Icheb getting a bit more development and kind of stepping up to the plate, wanting to be a member of Starfleet was quite good. 7 of 9 kind of discussing death was quite interesting. It's a perfectly okay episode. One thing that kind of annoys me, kind of following on from the other day where we were like, Janeway went toe-to-toe with a Borg tactical cube without a care in the world. And this episode's like, are you sure, Captain? Are you wanting to go back and face this rubble and remain? They might come back and turn us all into Borg. They literally did not care one bit, like 1 week ago, about going into the heart of the Borg, taking on a fully equipped Borg cube. Now they're a bit worried about some rubble and like a Borg cube turning up. It's that kind of, a bit lazy. You're thinking, did you not remember what you did last week? This should be a kind of a walk in the park.
Yeah, continuity, what is it? It's kind of a shame to have this episode right after the Borg 2-parter. It almost would have been better to have this further down the line in season 7. But at least some of the Borg children are the blink and you miss them or, fade into the background. Borg children finally depart the ship and Icheb remains. I feel like his character is strong enough to stay on board, and I agree. It's nice that he's endeavoring to become a Starfleet officer. I think if you were a fan of the Voyager relaunch novels, he does have a small role to play as a Starfleet officer. But I think this episode falls into that middle ground category where it's not horrible. It's not like invoking a strong reaction in either of us, but it's also not a great episode that I can sing my praises of like Muse. So it's just kind of, it's a 7 of 9 episode, and it reminded me a lot of Infinite Regress, where 7 of 9 was essentially malfunctioning and suffering from the Borg equivalent of multiple personality disorder, which is kind of funny because that was one of the episodes that was on my second block. So it's just kind of things come full circle on from there to here.
Yeah, it's as I say, it's an interesting episode. It's neither great, neither bad. It's just one of these kind of continuing episodes, and I think it's the idea of 7 of 9 kind of facing the concept of death, what happens beyond that, the idea of how it works as a Borg afterlife is quite interesting. One thing I it'd be amiss if I didn't mention as a big West Wing fanboy is, see when 7 of 9 puts up the little board with all the dead crew members. If anyone has never noticed that or been a total nerd and freeze framed it, you'll notice the names. Some names on there are Jay Bartlett, L. McGarry, T. Ziegler, S. Seaborn, Claudia Craig, and Charles Young. Those are characters on the West Wing, which was probably in its second season at that point. And the Akudas have put in a nice little wink and an Easter egg to that by having some of the West Wing crew be part of the Voyager crew. So I really like that, seeing kind of my Star Trek fandom and the West Wing fandom come together.
I know the writers of Star Trek and the Akudas particularly like putting Easter eggs like that. I kind of forgot that the West Wing characters were in this episode, so I'm glad you brought that up. But I don't think either of us have much to say on Imperfection. Shall we move on to Drive then?
Yeah, let's bash on.
All right. So, finishing up today's episode is Drive, and this is a B'Elanna Torres and Tom Paris episode. They encounter a group of aliens who are essentially conducting the Indy 500, but in space, for shuttlecraft, and Tom Paris practically begs Janeway to join, as this is his dream job, piloting the Delta Flyer in a race. And this is Voyager gets competitive and installs some team pride. B'Elanna asks to be the co-pilot with Tom Paris, and of course complications arise because this is a Star Trek episode. And the end of the episode, the race is finished, and Tom Paris and B'Elanna Torres are finally married. What do you think of this episode, Lee?
Yeah, I think it's a perfectly enjoyable episode. I think it's taken long enough for Star Trek to have a space race episode, a bit of wacky races, and it's perfectly kind of fun and enjoyable. And yeah, I can't really kind of fault this episode. I think it's nice that there's a bit of character growth with Torres, Paris. I've never really bought into Paris and Torres as a relationship. I think Paris is too self-absorbed to be properly in a relationship. There's so many times where you think back into season 5 when B'Elanna was really suffering with depression, and Paris is so caught up in his Delta Flyer he doesn't notice she's depressed. I think, yeah, that makes him human, but I also think it shows as well that perhaps he's not the greatest marriage material. I think it's a relationship that's not as developed as well as it could be. I think it's perfectly fine, and I'm happy they're married. I think they're both really good characters, and I'm happy they're married. But I'm not ever going to stage going, oh, finally, it's great. They're not. It's not like it was Niles and Daphne, or Ross and Rachel, or Odo and Kira. It's nice, and that's okay.
So, because Voyager is my favorite Star Trek show, and I was a bit of a shipper in days gone by, I kind of disagree with you, Lee, about Paris and Torres. I feel like Tom definitely grew up on this show. For instance, that episode that you refer to where B'Elanna is suffering from depression, I remember Paris, catching on really early that something was wrong, but B'Elanna was able to fake it and shrug him off to avoid detection. So I don't find fault with Tom. And I said finally married because they kept referencing during season 6 especially that they were dating and living together, but because of the fake out in Course Oblivion, they weren't officially married yet. And it feels like it took one disaster for them to finally admit that they were in love with each other in Day of Honor. So it feels fitting that they were going to agree to be married when their Delta Flyer is almost on the verge of blowing up. So that feels fitting to me. I feel like B'Elanna needs Tom as much as Tom needs B'Elanna, but I may be biased because I also follow them in the Star Trek Voyager relaunch novels. So I'm coming at it from a different perspective because I read the novels than you, Lee.
Yeah, and it certainly adds to it and stuff. It makes the TV just part of that continuing adventure, whereas I can only really go on what I see on the TV series. And I think sometimes that, say the books for example, they retrospectively enhance something that's been perhaps underdeveloped, and I think that's a pretty good thing sometimes. I think it's something you see a lot with Star Wars, say the prequels, and probably with Voyager as well. Both were probably the most maligned part. That Voyager was the most maligned part of Star Trek, the prequels were the most maligned part of Star Wars, and sometimes the Clone Wars TV shows, the books, all these sorts of things can really enhance that, and I think that's great.
Yeah, sometimes when you're looking at a sci-fi universe, looking at all the moving parts, not just the televised bits, can enhance your viewing, but sometimes you can also feel overloaded. For instance, I don't read all the Star Trek novels, I just follow Voyager's novels, because it was just, the lit universe was just too much to keep up with. But that's kind of segueing into a Literary Treks episode, isn't it, Lee?
We can have a debate on this. This is our last episode. We can do anything. They're going to chuck us out of here anyway in a minute.
We're going to be shown the door soon as this episode ends. So, I think Drive falls into that category of comfort food for me. Like the Haunting of Deck 12 that we covered a few days ago. It's not the best episode, but it's definitely something that I feel happy watching, and I think that's because of how I watch Voyager. I pay attention to the characters a lot more than the plot, and anything featuring B'Elanna is going to be high on my list. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's good to know that there's a kind of world beyond these TV shows in terms of the books that people can kind of dive into, and they can retrospectively enhance things. They can build upon things that maybe needed a bit more development. And as I say, I'm just strictly a Star Trek fan of the shows and movies they put out there and the behind the scenes stuff. I don't really get into the kind of literary world, so I can definitely see how it enhances things, and I say fair play when it does that it does what the best people do sometimes, where we watch episodes like this and we go, oh, that was really great. I wonder what the relationship is like on when we don't see them, and I think that can be a great testament to that. So yeah, I would say check out those episodes, and have we looked through the Literary Treks back catalogue, and I'm sure there's going to be some episodes that maybe develop on some of what we've spoken about here.
Yeah, so listeners, if you want to let us know what you think, you can find us in the Babel Conference. You can tag me, and I'm sure I'll read your post. Lee, where can people find you elsewhere on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on my own podcast, Filibuster, on the Nerd Party Network. You can find me on Twitter, @Lee_Nostromo. You can find me at Star Trek VHS. And you can find me on the Earl Grey podcast. And I just want to say a big, thanks, and, I'm sure I speak for both of us here. It's been such a pleasure to be involved here on From There to Here, and to have been podcasting with amazing people like Caitlin, Zach, Brandon, Mike, everyone in between. The fact that for a lot of people that are probably listening to these episodes, that it's a daily 15-minute dose. For the people that are kind of have been on, it's like the amount of time people have spent to watch the episodes again. Hours spent a week catching up, recording and editing behind the scenes. A big thanks to Michael Schindler for putting this together, bringing so many people, and to getting to here we are, kind of the tail end of December now. And I think it's an amazing achievement, and something he doesn't get enough credit for. I think these episodes have been an amazing achievement as a producer and as a guy. I think Mike's done something truly special here. So, and it's been great to have played a part in that. So I look forward to speaking to you all again on Earl Grey, and I'm very thankful for my time here on From There to Here, where I've been able to talk about some of my favorite episodes, talk about why I think some of them aren't that great, and to podcast with people all around the world. It's been some achievement getting all this put together. So a big thanks to everyone for getting involved and in front and behind the microphones.
Yes, I definitely echo that sentiment, especially to Mike, who helped me. This is only my third block, and Mike was the host for my first block, so he definitely helped me hit the ground running. And then my second block was with Richard, and now this is my last block with you, Lee. So if you want to get in touch with us, Lee already let you know his Twitter handlers, but I'm at Walsh Caitlin. And if you're interested in listening to more podcasts with my voice on it, I can be found on Star Trek Romulans Bearing Gifts. And I am still part of the Babel Conference, so let me know what you think of Voyager. It's okay if it's not your favorite series. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm just thankful for this opportunity to let you guys know that this is my favorite series. So, until next time, this is Caitlin signing off, and Lee, and we would say, live long and prosper one last time.
Live long and prosper, and I love you. Bye.
Bye.